What's going on, Facebook? Truth or Lie Thursdays. Once again, that's coming up here with question number 5. And question number 5 basically said, what does it mean to hear from God? How does one know that it is God that was spoken to him? Very good question. Very good question, because there's so many voices in the world, so many things that we, that we see, that we go through, we hear, and we want to know, well, how do we know that God is speaking to us? How do we do that? So hearing from God can be any way that God inspires us or speaks to us. The primary and first most important way that God speaks to us is through the scriptures. And the reason that is because God already inspired prophets to record the scriptures already. So that's the best way to get to know how he speaks, his voice, his heart, his mindset. So through the scriptures, which are already verified to be from God, we can know how God talks, and not how he talks, but basically his heart. And so we can recognize him, his voice. The next way is through creation. Okay? The Bible says that we can look at creation, how he's designed certain things in the planet, and be able to tell certain things about him so that we know, who he is, and when we hear his voice, we can recognize it. And also through our conscience. Our conscience basically is that conviction that we get right versus wrong. Okay, so when we understand that conscience and we hear our conscience, God has designed that conscience. And so Psalms 19 describes how through the scriptures and through creation and through our conscience, we can understand who God is, and start to recognize his voice when he speaks to us. Another way that God speaks to us is through dreams and visions. Job 7, verse 14 says he terrifies us with dreams, it talks about dreams and visions in Job 7:14. About he warns us through dreams and terrifies us with visions, something like that. Another way, of course, is prayer. That's probably the second to the scriptures and through the conscience and through creation, is just prayer, just talking to God. Once you've heard him, once you recognize that he is there, you start talking to him and just communicating to him. And God communicates back. Sometimes he communicates through thoughts. Sometimes he communicates through pictures in our mind. Sometimes it's the dreams and the visions. But communication is a two-way street. And so once you spend time with God, basically you get to learn his voice. And so the only way to know that God is speaking to you is by spending time with him. The more time, the more years you spent reading through the scriptures, the whole back and forth, Genesis to Revelation, read those back and forward, years and years, over and over again. Bathe that in prayer daily, in the morning and noon, at night, and just walk with him. And also obeying God, because you really can't walk with God without obeying God, because he's Lord, he's Master. So when you obey him and you spend time with him and you pray to him and you communicate with him, you begin to know his voice. His sheep know his voice. And so that's how you know God's voice.